Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of The Clueless Capitalist, where we discover interesting startups, interview founders, and help you become less clueless with angel investing. So in this episode, we are going to be speaking to Omar Moonis. Omar spent more than 2 decades in traditional banking and then moved on into the world of Web3, crypto, blockchain, and DeFi. He is now the co-founder of SoDeFi, and he's going to be here to shed light in this entire space, which me and Osman are clueless about. So welcome to the episode, Omar.
Thank you for having me, Razy. Great to see both of you again.
So maybe we can start with you sharing a little bit about your journey from traditional banking to this world of crypto, Web3, and blockchain and everything.
Yeah, actually, it's been an interesting journey. I would say it actually started back in 2008, 2009, when the global financial crisis was happening. And I was working with Citi in Poland. And at that point in time, I saw the stock price of Citi drop from $50 to $1. And out of that mess, white paper appeared on the landscape, and it was the Bitcoin white paper. And it was talking about peer-to-peer money that had no centralized authorities. And the point was that, can we trust governments? Can we trust banks? To do the right thing, because the global financial crisis came out of nowhere from supposedly highly stable companies, highly valued banks, backed with the full faith of governments. And financial crisis upended all of that. So the Bitcoin white paper came out of that. Now, I'm not necessarily saying I'm a proponent of the Bitcoin white paper, but putting that in context, that was a seminal moment because that global financial crisis also marked my transition from Poland to Singapore. And I came here in 2009 to continue my traditional banking career. But at the back of my mind, as Bitcoin kept developing, I started to go from being a hobby to, gaining some steam. And then additional coins came on the market. I started to feel that traditional banking is perhaps a little bit behind the curve, and that the future of finance lies potentially in decentralized systems. And that sort of sparked the interest in the blockchain, not necessarily Bitcoin. People like to think they're one and the same, but you think of Bitcoin as the train and you think of blockchain as the rails. So I'm most interested in the rails, not necessarily in the trains themselves, if that answers the question.
If I was to be completely frank, I think both me and Razy have been talking, and always tongue-in-cheek, about Bitcoin and Web3.
Yes.
And we really just don't understand it. So pretty much every time we talk about it, we feel like we're jumping onto a particular bandwagon that's already left the station. And we're kind of like in that same situation with AI at the moment, whereas everybody who used to be talking on LinkedIn about blockchain and they were Web3 experts are now AI experts. But the people that are still pushing for Web3, I think that's where the maturity has now got to in terms of the entire hype cycle has eroded, and it's now back to the core fundamentals. But the problem is that both me and Razy, we never bothered looking at the core fundamentals, and that's why we're here with you today to understand a little bit more about that. Now, my personal view has been that blockchain has always been a solution looking for a problem, and probably want you to pretty much help kind of stitch that together to say what kind of problems can Web3 solve, and then maybe we can then start to delve a little bit deeper into some of the basic terminology of it all, because all of it goes above my head at the moment.
I think that that's a true statement to some extent, that the blockchain is a solution looking for a problem. Remember, the whole system is based out of distrust with the existing financial system. So you have to see that basically it is the antidote, if you will, or the antithesis to how things run today. And there are obviously some pros and cons in that approach. Now, if you really want to think about it, what is the blockchain good for? So first of all, what is the blockchain? The blockchain is a decentralized distributed ledger. What does that mean? In the old days, if you were an accountant, you had a ledger where you captured all the transactions, all the debits and credits that went through the company. But in a distributed ledger, instead of one person being an accountant, there are hundreds of accountants all over the world, and each of them is maintaining a copy of the ledger, and each of them is recording transactions, and each of them is synced with each other. So in that kind of system, there is no opportunity for any one person to have ultimate authority, and there's also very limited ability for there to be any fraud or any other kind of mismanagement of funds, because everybody has to agree on every transaction that gets posted to the blockchain. So it's not some people like to call it a trustless environment. It's not true that it's a trustless environment. It is a distributed trust environment, in the sense that I am relying on a whole bunch of people that I don't know, but each of those folks has incentives in place to do the right thing and to contribute to the ongoing operation of the blockchain. So it is a distributed, decentralized network. There is no one central server. Every computer on it, every person on it is just another node in the network that potentially can contribute to the ongoing operation of the blockchain.
If I was to try and break this down, it sounds like how when the internet first came about, and the reason why the internet came about was because if there was a nuclear war and we knocked out infrastructure, we needed a network that can carry and transact information and self-heal itself. And that's where the internet came about. And that was pretty much like version 1 of internet. And so if I'm taking what you're saying, then the blockchain is something similar to version 1 of the internet, in that even if we take down one copy of a ledger or we try and abuse it, there's going to be multiple copies distributed that are constantly synchronized and can self-heal itself and reject any attempts at tampering. Is that right?
I love that analogy, because actually I was in fact thinking about this exact analogy earlier today, which is the blockchain is exactly like the early days of the internet. Because remember, the internet was supposed to be a peer-to-peer computing system, right? Where anyone can connect with anyone. You had a unique domain or an IP address that allowed you to basically ping any other computer on the network. And in the early days of the internet, that's exactly what it was. It was completely decentralized. It was completely distributed. And in fact, when you look at the blockchain now, right, today they call the blockchain Web 3.0. And the reason why they call it Web 3.0 is, if you look back exactly to what you're talking about, the history of the internet, Web 1.0 is, the static internet, right? You can click on stuff, you can look at web pages, you can read them, but you can't do anything with them. It's really read-only. Then you went from that to Web 2.0, right? Where you started to get into dynamic interactive content provided by centralized entities, your Googles and your YouTubes and your Facebooks, etc., Twitter or X. And now you're going to Web 3.0. And in Web 3.0, basically you have a decentralized network powered by blockchain technology, where users have control of their own data and control of the online activity that they share with others. So again, it really is kind of, in a sense, it is like the ethos of the early days of the internet, which it is taking you back to where you control what you do, you control what you see, you control what you share, and no one else can tell you how to do it. Whereas in Web 2.0, for the convenience, we may have given up a lot of things, like our identity, our browsing habits, our preferences, in exchange for free access to stuff. I mean, today we rely on Google to help us find stuff. We rely on Amazon to help us buy stuff. But in the old internet, there were no Googles, there were no, Amazons. You just found stuff because your friends told you about it, or it was posted somewhere in some message board, and that's how you found stuff. And in order to scale up, we went to a centralization phase. But now if you want to take it back to Web 3.0, the next evolution should be, hey, how do people take back control of their own digital identities? Because increasingly, our digital identities are guiding our future.
Now, that's really interesting, because I hadn't really thought of it like that. We're kind of digressing a little bit, because I had these really basic questions, but now it's turning into a little bit philosophical as well, because I was just thinking, if I was to talk to anybody about blockchain like years ago, when people were just talking about Bitcoin going to the moon and, hodl for dear life kind of thing, the general feeling was that it's going to revolutionize everything because we can take back control, and we've got the anonymity that we used to have on the internet, and therefore we're doing that. But then the more I delved into the way all of this is working out and how it's playing out, if I wanted to on-ramp onto the blockchain or off-ramp onto the blockchain and convert it to a cash transaction, well, suddenly my anonymity is gone. And in actual fact, the benefit of the blockchain is that I can, if I wanted to, look at every single transaction and look at every single wallet. And even though it's anonymous by nature, eventually it becomes like identifiable. So when people give me the whole benefits of anonymity, I'm just thinking it's anonymity to a point. And then the question is, well, what have we really taken back? Have we taken back control, or have we just relinquished it back again into big government and big banking?
I love it. Listen, you can't talk about the blockchain without getting philosophical. There's a lot of philosophy built in, and there are instances of it where it is like a religion, which either you believe or you don't believe. And it's okay to be skeptical, because I am as well. That's fine. I would say that, first of all, there's two things. There's transparency, which is one part of what you hit on, right? Everything, if it is a public blockchain, which means anyone can access it, then all your transactions are available for anyone to see. When I say I mean your anonymous wallets transactions are available for anyone to see, right? They can see how much you have in your wallet. They can see what's come in, what's come out, etc., etc. In terms of your identity, though, I mean, whether it stays secret or it is revealed, and who you reveal it to, in a sense, that is still up to you. Because if I choose never to on-ramp or off-ramp, then the ability to link me to a particular token or a particular wallet address is incredibly limited. In fact, it can't be done, because blockchain addresses don't correspond to locations like IP addresses do, right? With IP addresses, like, okay, this IP is in Virginia, the next IP is, also probably in Virginia, but in blockchain, you can have one address, another address, and they can be completely different parts of the world. The second thing is, if you do choose to on-ramp and off-ramp, you're typically going to go to on-ramp and off-ramp through trusted entities, right? Banks or centralized exchanges. And for them to know who you are, they're going to need to know who you are anyway to onboard you as a customer. So you're not doing anything different other than you're cashing out your earnings or you're adding on to your crypto holdings. So you've already, in a sense, you've already agreed to, give up something in exchange for a service, and you're in control of that. You can also choose, of course, if you wanted to, you can, like I said, continue to keep your crypto on chain and then just choose to grow your wealth in crypto, pay your bills in crypto, and do all of that stuff. And nobody will know who you are if you want to go that route. And that, I think, is definitely at the extreme end. But there are a number of people that are quite okay with that, because, for them, it is worth it. But honestly, most of us, we don't have anything to hide per se, right? I think people are worried about government overreach, but what government overreach? I mean, no government is coming after a bank account today. It's highly, highly unlikely they're going to come after your crypto accounts tomorrow, unless, of course, you're not like, let's say, you're maybe underreporting your income or doing something like that.
And we would never do that, right, Razy?
Never. It wouldn't happen. If there's one thing the clueless capitalists can absolutely hang their hat on is unimpeachable integrity.
Absolutely.
We still need to go and define all the other terms. And I mean, speaking of what like based on what you guys have been sharing, right? As a clueless person myself, I look at so I'm very skeptical of these things. In fact, so skeptical that I've not really bothered to read up much about it. I mean, I was looking at all this craze around ICOs a few years back, and then I looked at the kind of things people were ICOing. That is the term. That's all just crap. I was like, why are people buying this? Why is this worth so much? And then later on, we heard about all of these failed projects, but then whoever ICO'd, they walked away with a nice pile of cash. Then later on, and I mean, I don't know whether it's just, I think a few years later, there was NFTs, and everyone is saying, oh, this is the future, get the NFT. And then apparently, when you go onto certain platforms like OpenSea, people would inflate the prices of the NFTs by having other wallets buy it at a very high price, basically pumping it up.
Correct.
And that has gone to shit, essentially.
Yeah.
Right. So then most recently, the whole FTX thing, I know it's an exchange. It's not, I guess it wasn't Web3. But when I look at all of this as a clueless person, as someone who has been a bit I would say, like, not very trusting of these things. When I see these kind of news coming out, it like reinforces my belief. So I don't know where I was going with this, but yeah, I just wanted to put it out there. before we go and talk about the other thing?
Let me answer that because I think what you highlighted is a common concern. And a lot of it is, I look at it as, it's like looking at the surface of a choppy ocean, right? When you see it, it's very turbulent. But if you dive in 10 feet below, it's all very calm. And the thing is, what most people see is the choppy ocean. They're like, wow, this is really turbulent. I don't want to go in there. But if you were a scuba diver, you'd dive in and you'd be nicely swimming undisturbed by what's happening on the surface. And I think that's true with the blockchain as well, right? The news is kind of hijacked by, sort of the fringe element of it. And also remember, the news tends to like to latch on to the sensational stories, right? People who... Yeah. Some 14-year-old who made like a few $million on some NFTs and that's newsworthy, right? That's interesting. It gets people to click, it gets people to log in and things like that. But, hearing somebody who made $1 million over 25 years, not that interesting. Like, yeah, okay, whatever, So my point is that I think what you're seeing is you're seeing a very choppy surface of the ocean. I think the other thing that's also changed is that every year the industry continues to grow up a bit and mature. In the early days, you had a lot of people, experimenting with things. And as with any new technology, or with any technology at all, there's the ability to do good with it and you can also do bad with it. So like something like an ICO, right? On one hand, it's very interesting. You can go directly and fundraise without going through, public markets and things like that. I mean, think about Kickstarter, right? I used to have the Pebble smartwatch back before smartwatch was a category. And that's how much of a dinosaur I am. And I remember being an early backer and, you put money in like a couple $100 and, when they built the Pebble watch, they sent one to you. But there was nobody regulating that. If they turned around and did no Pebble watches, there was nobody to tell you, oh, well, who are you going to sue? So ICOs in that sense are interesting. But of course, the problem with that, right, is you get people who are, as always, looking to spoil things for everybody else. So you start getting into ICOs which are scams. You start getting into ICOs which are, you talked about some of these things, sort of pump and dump schemes and all of that stuff. And again, because that's newsworthy, it makes the news. And then, of course, governments get rightfully concerned because they're worried that their citizens are being targeted. And then they step in to regulate it. And ICOs should be regulated. I think there should be some minimum standard of due diligence performed. They should be more transparent. I'm not against ICOs, but I'm quite glad that whole ICO craze has passed by because, again, it was taking focus away from the blockchain and putting focus on crypto. And one relies on the other, but one isn't the other, so to speak.
Now be a good time to actually tell us what's an ICO.
Of course. So an ICO is an initial coin offering, right? It's the crypto equivalent of a IPO, which is an initial public offering for a stock. A new company comes in, let's say Amazon, they go public, they issue shares at $25 a pop. You buy shares, you hold them. Hopefully, long term, they grow in value, you build wealth. ICO, same thing. There's a project that has some sort of promise, and then they issue tokens, and each token represents some fractional benefit to the outcome of their project, right? So the more people that own those tokens, obviously, the more money the founders raise, which in turn, hopefully gives them the necessary capital they need to make their project come to fruition. And if it works well, it's a virtuous cycle. The better the project does, the higher the token price. The higher the token price, the more money to build the project, and so on and so forth. When it doesn't work, then clearly all the founders want to do is issue the token on some spurious project, watch the prices rise, put conditions on when people can unload those tokens, and then disappear with the money, right? And that is a lot of what was happening, especially around 2017, 2018 and thereabouts. There was a lot of ICOs. I remember talking to an entrepreneur here in Singapore, and she and her team had put aside a week to raise like a few $1 million. And apparently they raised the whole thing in 36 hours on a weekend. So they launched it on Friday, and then her team called her Saturday night and said, oh, we've shut the ICO. It's like, why? Because we reached our target. And I was thinking about this, like, well, this sounds like absolute madness. But, and I don't remember how viable the project was or what it did. But I do remember thinking that sounds a little extreme. But on the other hand, people believed in it enough to want to put money into it. And this was a well-regarded forum. This wasn't in some, dark alley in the, shadowy realms of Singapore.
I mean, there were some really interesting ones when I was looking at them. What was the most famous one was Banana Coin for me. It was like a banana plantation in Laos and they needed money, so they did an ICO and it was called Banana Coin. And
Right.
I thought, you can't get any more ludicrous than this. But there you go. You got a whole blockchain and crypto token for growing bananas in Southeast Asia. Amazing.
Blockchain Dogecoin was started as a gag.
Yeah.
The founders launched it as a laugh, and now it's a thing, right?
It's a real thing.
Elon Musk has talked about it. I wouldn't touch it, but the
Yeah.
fact of the matter is that this was back in, I think, 2014 or thereabouts, but it's still around and still going. So that you never know. But to your point is, when the Netflix hit TV show Squid Games came out, someone launched a Squid token. And a bunch of people bought them, and then the guys just disappeared. And so people bought all these Squid tokens, and this is where you start getting into meme coins and things like that, like coins which have some sort of a theme associated with it, more of an emotional value necessarily than a economic value. And so people bought bunches of them, and they're worth nothing.
I bought $1,000 worth of Dogecoin. I was just checking my phone. It's now worth $153.
Not bad. You mastered the art of buying high and selling low.
But he hasn't sold yet.
Oh, that's true. Buying high and holding low. See, that's the part that I don't understand. You told me you're skeptical, and I'm expecting reasonable, rational financial decisions. Then you go and buy $1,000 of Dogecoin.
That's where all the FOMO and the hype takes over. So, altcoin and meme coins, like, what's the difference?
The only true coin from the eyes of a blockchain purist is Bitcoin. So that's the coin. Every other coin other than Bitcoin is called an alternate coin or altcoin, right? Ethereum is an altcoin, Dogecoin is an altcoin, etc., etc. And meme coins are a subset of altcoins, right? So there are altcoins that do all kinds of different things, right? There are tokens that give you voting rights. There are tokens that are, give you access to a physical asset. And then there are tokens that, as I said, they don't have any economic value, but they have some social value that draws people to them. And those are meme coins. They may have some really bizarre underlying theme. And what the founders are hoping that, it builds a certain level of virality. And that virality drives, people to rush in and buy it, which promotes the price of the coin. And guess who benefits? The founders who likely have the biggest stash of those coins. So meme coins can be generally, in fact, almost always meme coins are absolute trash. I would stay away from them in every situation, unless you want to hold I guess the meme coin would be the same as, the lucky dice you have hanging from your side view mirror or your rear view mirror in your car. Look, if you like having it, by all means, but don't expect that stuff to be worth anything. So if you like hanging on to some meme coin which resonates with you because maybe it references some Pokemon character you grew up with, great, but don't buy it as a financial instrument.
Okay, I'm just selling my dog coin now.
You want to buy some?
Yeah, I'll buy some of you. $120.
I like it. Well, what this transaction here that was happening between you might have happened between you and Razy and Osman. I mean, that's a peer-to-peer transaction, right? That's what the whole idea of the blockchain was in the first place. But then you also have marketplaces that facilitate those trades. So you could have a centralized marketplace, like both of you could have accounts at an exchange like, Coinbase or crypto.com, and you can do that exchange you can do that transfer of assets via the exchange, or you can go to a decentralized exchange, which is basically, an exchange that doesn't have people, it's just code, and you can trade your assets via those.
Yeah, that's interesting. Because, I always think of you have to go to an exchange and put something on there and put it into a wallet in the exchange, and then it's traded from there. What I remember interviewing a startup founder who was doing, I think it's a decentralized exchange. Basically, they had nothing. Everyone had their own offline wallets, their cold wallets, and if they wanted to transact, they would find each other and then they would just share their wallet addresses and transact. But the exchange, all it was doing was just like saying, Osman's here and he's got like, he tells me he's got like a Bitcoin and Razy's got a Dogecoin, and like, let's swap them out or something like that. I mean, other stuff that's been hitting the headlines around this whole crypto space has been, you know, the shift from proof of work to proof of stake or something like that. Again, didn't really understand it. All I knew was that originally when Bitcoin was there, you had miners, and miners did mathematical calculations on their GPUs that would then, for that effort, you would then be awarded some Bitcoin and you would allow the transactions to be validated. Apparently, it sounds like that's been changed, but I didn't really understand what the difference was.
Okay, they're substantially different. You know, you perfectly outlined proof of work, and for proof of work, whoever the miner is or miners are, you need substantial computational power, because like you said, you have to solve a complex mathematical equation in order to earn the privilege to confirm transactions and add blocks of data to the network, right? Now, when you move to and the problem with proof of work is that even though it's extremely secure and it's extremely rigorous, it's also extremely slow and energy hog, right? If you think about it, all these computers are, working furiously to solve something before the other. It's like each time a transaction needs to be confirmed, there's a little bit of a computer arms race happening, right? So everybody's consuming a lot of power just to confirm a few transactions. So when you go to proof of stake though, in proof of stake, instead of having miners, you have a role called a validator. And validators get chosen based on how much of their own tokens they commit to the process. So for instance, if let's say I have 100 tokens of Ethereum, right? If I commit those 100 tokens, then I have a chance to be picked as the next person to validate a set of transactions on the blockchain. So validators get picked by the size of their stake on the blockchain, right? The benefit of it is that you don't have to solve any mathematical puzzle. You don't have to do any of that. So it's fast, it's energy efficient. The drawback though is that you can have people that might amass so much wealth that they are now getting picked extraordinary number of times to confirm transactions. So in blockchain, there's always called this blockchain trilemma, which is speed, security, and decentralization. And these are like 3 points of a triangle, because when you solve for two of them, you find you can't solve for the third. So in the case of proof of stake, you solve for speed and you solve for, to some extent, security, but you don't solve for decentralization. Or you can say you solve for decentralization and speed, but you don't solve for security. So all of these blockchains have a trade-off of some sort. And Ethereum and Bitcoin both had proof of work as their mechanisms for confirming transactions on the blockchain. But Ethereum over 2 years ago transitioned from proof of work to proof of stake, and now is completely a proof of stake blockchain.
Right. So theoretically, if I was like Elon Musk and had a billion gazillion Ethereum tokens, pretty much because I'm the biggest whale on the network, I'm gonna get picked all the time.
Not all the time, but a high number of times. And the thing is, though, the built-in sort of safety feature is that if you as a validator are found doing fraud or anything like that, you lose your entire stake. So you forfeit everything. Yeah.
Really?
So if I put in my 1,000, let's say Ethereum tokens, and I stake it, and if I'm the validator found guilty of perpetrating fraud or manipulation, then all of my 1,000 tokens are forfeit. So that's your built-in sort of
motivation,
integrity mechanism. Yeah, corrective mechanism.
Hey, what happened to all those companies that were doing the mining then? All those people who set up these operations where they had all of these computers to do the mining. What happens to them now?
Every year what has happened is that the miners have started to either go out of business or they've started to pool their resources together, right? Because first of all, your rewards are getting smaller all the time, because Bitcoin is anti-inflationary, so there will only ever be 21 million Bitcoins created, right? And so as a result of that, every couple of years, the reward for mining a Bitcoin is half. That whole process is called halving. And so the reward is less, the effort is more. So some miners, after a while, say, hey, economically, this isn't working for me anymore. And in cases of other miners, the bigger ones, they've decided to just pool their resources and share the rewards. That's how it's been working. Now, to offset the reward, the number of tokens you get a reward is, of course, the value of those rewards is also pretty high, right? Because, I mean, today, Bitcoin is around 54,000, 52,000 thereabouts. And, if you're comparing it to 2 years ago, that's a significant jump. So even though the tokens they're earning is less, but the value of those tokens is more. But the economics of mining is tricky every year. It becomes trickier.
I'm just checking the price of Bitcoin because I saw that it was dropping significantly recently.
This maybe you can do the next episode. What's going on here? Like everything is right now, all down 20%.
That you need someone with a massive crystal ball. The problem is that everyone is great at explaining things after the fact. Nobody can explain it while it's happening. Later on we'll talk about, it's linked to this, it's, this crisis and that crisis. But as it's happening, and that's not just crypto, and that is to do with the stock market as well. The prevailing theory is that it could be, the conflicts, global conflicts around the world. The other one is the expectation that interest rates, will they be lowered or not? Because, generally, economically speaking, when you lower interest rates, it's a big boost to the markets because, borrowing is cheaper. So you can technically borrow and invest, and it's a big bump to the stock market. And traditionally, Bitcoin especially was considered a hedge to the stock market. But now actually they sort of seem to move together, right? Because either people are convinced by the market, in which case they'll put money in equities, they'll put money in crypto, or they're not, in which case they'll maybe hold it in safer assets like treasury bills or bonds. So there are a number of theories floating around. There's another theory floating around that there's a large amount of Bitcoin that is potentially coming back onto the market, that is being recovered from a hack that happened, a number of years ago on a Bitcoin exchange in Japan called Mt. Gox, right? So, there could be billions of dollars of potentially Bitcoin coming back on the market. And so people are saying that that's depressing the price of Bitcoin. But since the overall market is down, I don't think that's the problem. I think it's more related to, larger geopolitical factors, as well as, what central banks are going to do for the rest of the year. But I'm not an economist, so.
Okay. This reminds me, and this is related to your work at TRM Labs, and I just wanted to ask this question because it's a bit of a side thing. Somebody came to my wife and said, can you lend me some money? I've invested in some coins, and for whatever reason, I need to put more money in to get my original amount back. Now, this is like a pig butchering scam, right? But my immediate thinking was, well, even though this person feels like they've lost all their money through these coins, what's the reality of being able to hire someone to go and find out where those tokens have gone to and try and recover it? If they've done it for Mt. Gox, are they able to do it for people who have been victims of these types of scams? Completely unrelated to what we're meant to be talking about, but I thought I may as well just throw it out there because I wanted to ask and I knew I'd forget later on.
Yeah, no problem. So, tools like the company I used to work at, they're great at finding where things went, but recovery is a whole different animal, right? Because in crypto, you can't undo a transaction. Once it's gone, it's gone. So if, let's say, Razy is sending his $1,000 of Dogecoin to your wallet address, Osman, and he mistypes a couple of letters in there, as long as it's a valid address, it's gone, right? And good luck, you're never getting it back, because you can send a message to that person, you can send a message on the blockchain to that person saying, hey, I think I sent you my token by mistake, but nobody sends things back generally, right? And so when you have these scams and hacks, right, when people say they do recoveries, that it's recovering the original funds is very, very difficult. And I'll tell you why. Let's say you are a customer in exchange and the exchange gets hacked. Your wallet is compromised. Your money gets sent elsewhere. Now, if that money gets sent to another centralized exchange and exchange A is able to tell exchange B quickly enough, then exchange B can, let's say, freeze the hacker's account, right? So now the hacker can't move any money because all of their money is frozen and you can recover from there. but you're not recovering your original token. And so even with Mt. Gox, they're not recovering original tokens. They still don't know where they went. What's happened with Mt. Gox is that they found tokens that were sitting on some wallet somewhere. And because Mt. Gox's internal control was so poor, they don't even know how much was stolen, how much was misplaced and just mismanaged. So they found a stash of tokens, and because that stash of tokens is now worth like 20x, 40x what it was back then, they're able to repay people in dollars. They're not repaying you in tokens because they don't have them, but the value of the tokens have gone up so much that they're able to repay you. Same thing with FTX. FTX hasn't recovered any tokens. You're getting paid because the founder of FTX was an early adopter of Solana and invested a bunch of FTX funds into Solana, and Solana appreciated significantly. So thanks to Solana's gains, FTX is able to pay back in USD, but not in tokens, right? So any of these recoveries, you're not getting tokens back. Getting tokens back is virtually impossible. Where investigative tools are useful is they're useful for trying to shut the flow of funds somewhere and to contain the problem, right? So maybe you lost 100 Ethereum, but you want to make sure you contain it so you don't lose, 10 million Ethereum, right? So these tools are very useful for that. And then they're also very useful for, permanently marking risky addresses as risky addresses. So that you never have to deal with them if you're a bank or another exchange and a request came from this such an address, you'd be like, this address has been involved in illicit activity in the past, I want nothing to do with it, right? So that's where the benefit of these tools are. They prevent contagion from spreading, and they also help identify where hacked, stolen, compromised funds went so that people can be prosecuted. If you're lucky, somewhere funds can be frozen and you can recover from that. But recovering money in crypto is incredibly difficult. Unfortunately,
No, I was just going to say, this is really fascinating for me because I had no idea. I was just thinking, oh wow, I mean, they've managed to recover it and people are getting paid back in tokens. I genuinely did not know that. And
people wish they're being paid back in tokens. So if you go to Reddit and other forums and Telegram, places like that, people are really upset. Not that they're getting paid back, but they're like, hey, my token, I had 40 tokens on Mt. Gox, I'm getting back the equivalent of 2 tokens, same dollar value, but where's my capital appreciation? Because if Mt. Gox hadn't been hacked, I would have been holding those tokens, and today I'd be, a millionaire 4 times over. But I'm not, because the exchange got hacked, and now you're giving me the 20K that I invested back then. Big deal.
Yeah, man. And there's Razy and me with $100 of Dogecoin, and we're kind of like thinking, who can give us our money back?
Another Doge.
Yeah, I know. I mean, we've really gone off on a bit of a tangent because I know that we were originally planning to ask you some like really, really basic questions. And I think we've covered most of them. Things like the ones we didn't really cover were, like DeFi and smart contracts and what's a DApp. And shall we just quickly cover them off in terms of terminology? Because I know that people talk about this, especially when I'm talking to founders and they go, oh, we're a DeFi, this and that, and we're doing X, Y, and Z, and we're going to execute a smart contract for this business, for an estate agent. And my eyes glaze over when people start talking to me about that. Generally would like to know, what is DeFi and what are smart contracts, and are they related?
Yeah, absolutely. So, earlier in this podcast, we have taken a very nice meandering path down the river. You had asked me a question which I actually never answered, because you asked me, what are the uses of the blockchain? And it sounds like a solution seeking a problem. And, decentralized finance or DeFi is such a solution, right? So basically what is decentralized finance in a nutshell is providing financial products and financial services without a middleman, right? So today you need a loan, you would go to Citibank or DBS or whoever, or if you need insurance, you would go to, Liberty Mutual or Prudential or any of these places. But the thing is, can you get access to these products without an intermediary, right? And that is the crux of decentralized finance. Very simple. And decentralized finance is powered by blockchain technology, because blockchain technology at its very root is decentralized and distributed, right? Now, when you talk about smart contracts, so Smart contracts are basically code that sits on the blockchain that does stuff when you fulfill conditions that the code is looking for. So like, I'll give you a very simple example. Like let's say, you wanted to convert your tokens, let's say from Dogecoin to Polygon, right? In the traditional world, you would go to a money changer. You're like, I have British pounds, can you give me Sing dollars, right? Or you would go to a bank, but you're going to some centralized entity. Now imagine instead of a centralized entity, you took that function, codified it and put it on the blockchain, and now you can automatically call that address and say, here's my 1000 Dogecoin, give me Polygon, and it automatically does it for you, right? So that's what smart contracts are. You can think of them as, sort of Excel macros, if you will. They're not that smart.
Mm-hmm.
They're not very well named in terms of, they're automated code basically that sits on the blockchain and does stuff. You can ask it to, send money here, there, everywhere. Again, a smart contract can do it. You can ask it to issue new tokens. Again, a smart contract can do that. You can ask it to burn or, destroy tokens. A smart contract can do that. So that's what smart contracts do. And they can be quite involved, but in the end, it is just code with if then, if this. That's really what it is.
All right. Okay. So it's a bit like an event-driven execution of code.
Exactly.
If I had a house and I was selling it to Razy, if I confirm that the transaction has been paid for, then the generation of the title deeds and all the kind of other stuff could be automatically executed through the blockchain, and then the entire transaction would be recorded on the blockchain and proof.
Yeah. Look, you could have I'll give you, your example is a much more, as actually a great example. If I was to simplify it, let's say you had an e-commerce setup, right? Where, you are buying $100 of stuff that Razy is selling on the web. And you can have a smart contract in the middle that, the money is sitting there and will only get paid out when the recipient confirmed they received the product and they're happy with it, right? So you can have smart contract that acts as an escrow, for instance. You could have, that's just a person-to-person transaction. Imagine doing it, country to country. From a trade perspective, you can have smart contracts that say, hey, if I receive, you can use it to capture documentation. If I've received, the letter of credit and all these other trade documents, then I can release the trade financing funds that I have available, etc., etc.
Cool. No, actually, that really does make sense, because the amount of problems you have with regards to trust for these types of transactions, they're real. They're real problems. Putting it back into context though, and putting a bit of a, some kind of like cooling element to this as well. Every time I've transferred like a partial coin to my offline wallet, I have that moment of panic and fear, because I have to wait, and I have to wait for a long time before it tells me your coin's here. So are we talking about like instantaneous, or are we talking like wait for 5 minutes or 30 minutes, depending on which way the
it depends on the blockchain, right? Remember the trilemma: speed, security, decentralization. The faster you are, you're less likely to be less decentralized. So your example where you had to wait was probably Bitcoin or some Bitcoin-based network, because, it's a proof of work system, and proof of work systems will take time because they're sitting there chugging through each transaction, using all that computational power to approve them, right? That can take time. And if the network is congested, that can take a little bit longer, right? It is there. It's not going to get lost. You're in the queue, but the queue takes longer to clear because there's so many people waiting at the bus stop. But if you're on a faster, blockchain, like let's say a Solana or something like that, your transaction will be like that. It'll come here, there, but then, it's fast, but then people are like, well, is it, decentralized enough? Is it secure enough? So you have trade-offs. The thing is that it is a little bit of a beauty contest when people say, well, which is the best blockchain? Because it sort of depends on what matters to you, right? If speed is your thing, then the worst solution is Bitcoin for anything, right? Because it is not fast, it is not scalable. On the other hand, if security is your thing, then Bitcoin is highly secure. right? And if you don't care about speed, and that's why you have so many blockchains as well, right? That people always ask, like, why do we need so many blockchains? And I would say we don't need so many, but each new iteration is trying to solve for the 3 points of the triangle, right? And either they're trying to solve for speed without sacrificing security and decentralization, but it is because these things tug at each other. When you improve one, you by default degrade some other criteria.
No, sounds good.
If you're interested about SoDeFi, make sure you connect with Omar, look at his postings and whatever he's talked about today. You'll see more of that on his LinkedIn post. So be sure to follow him and be sure to follow SoDeFi. So we'll see you on the next episode. Thank you.
Thank you guys. Take care. Be well.